Welcome into War Up on the WPIAL. Greg Warnock and Jeff Upson with you here. Another fun weekend of wrestling action. A number of WPIAL schools wrestling in some tournaments. And Jeff, this weekend we're going to see all kind of wrestlers wrestling in some individual tournaments as well. So don't really have much to report yet on the team portion aspect, but between last weekend and this weekend, we're going to see just about most of the WPIL wrestling in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I mean, most of the schools are all going to be in some tournaments, whether that's league tournaments or like a tournament like the Midwinter Mayhem coming up. It's kind of that weird transition period where you have duels and you also have the individual tournaments still poking their heads around. So it's a good time of the year. We got people still coming down in their descents. I was up in Counter Sport, and let me tell you, Greg, have you ever been to Counter Sport before?
Never have.
It's a you better buckle up. It's a trip. It's a trip and a half, and you add snow on top of that, and it gets real dicey. I was going down some roads, like the sign. I was basically like a mile and a half, 2 miles from the high school. There was a sign that said pavement ends, and then there were signs for like snowmobiles and four wheelers. And I was on that road for like 3.5 miles, and I was like, I'm not going to make it in my Honda CRV with like a foot of snow up there. We did make it. It was a heck of a little tournament up there, and but yeah, it's hard enough to do that if the weather's perfect, let alone with the snow. Forget about it.
Well, you made it back and got to see some good wrestling in there as well, and brought it to everyone who follows PA Power here on Rockfin.
Yeah, we had a couple really good. West Mifflin was there from the WPIAL. One notable result: Cooper Dietz from West Mifflin beats Cody Hamilton. That was a huge win for Cooper. Cody did bump up, but still, that's a really good win for Cooper Dietz. There was a team from Wyoming there, which was super impressive that they were able to come out from, and I guess they were like maybe like a top five. Like I heard they were the second best team in Wyoming. They didn't fare too well in Pennsylvania. It was the coach. I talked to their coach a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, you guys are built different out here." And like you go to Countersport, and when you enter Potter County, there's a sign that says God's Country. So like that kind of gives you. And I learned what FAA was, or FFA. I learned what FFA was, Future Farmers of America. We didn't have that at Central Dauphin, but they had a whole section devoted to ag and FFA. So I learned all about that. It was a good experience for me all around.
Amazing that school from Wyoming comes all the way out to Coudersport of all places, but I'm sure they got the experience that they wanted as far as wrestling some quality Pennsylvania teams. Some schools that know about FFA are down in Tri-County this past weekend, Jeff. A number of these schools are in those programs. But a lot of these schools wrestling each other, and a lot of WPIAL schools going at it. As far as let's start. We always start with the individuals arts and then get into the team portion. But just kind of diving into the team side, Jeff. The champ was McGuffey. They win by 1.5 over Trinity and Peters Township, not far behind in third place. But a great tournament for McGuffey.
Yeah, I mean, I said it at the beginning of the year. McGuffey was going to be a really good team. They had some balance and some depth. I think they're starting to wrestle really well. I will say them and Trinity were in a dogfight. I mean, 1.5 separated them from the championship. Canamac was all the way in fifth, and they had 151.5 points. So, I mean, the balance has shifted a little bit. Not that it's. I mean, I'm not saying the Canamac and the Waynesburgs of the world aren't what they used to be. But I think you see teams like McGuffey, Peters Township as well, doing really well. Trinity continues to just kind of chip away. And part of that was TJ Allison coming back. He had been out for quite a while, and he comes back at 145 pounds, and he gets a major on Talon Mazanko from South Fayette. It was a pretty impressive 14-3 match. So he's going to be a huge help to their team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Getting that major definitely helps, especially in the finals. But then on the other side, his teammate Devin Junko gets to the finals. Great tournament for him, but then gets tacked by Lucas Barr and McGuffey. So you're looking for that point and a half difference. Those kind of results end up making the difference as far as the team standing. But overall, yeah, just a solid tournament from both schools. Starting at the top, Jeff at 107 pounds, Leif Serco of Ringgold. He won by major decision over Jackson Hoy at Trinity to win the title.
Yeah, he's one that I'll definitely admit was under the radar for us on the ranking standpoint. He definitely fell through a little bit, and it's hard with Ringgold. I'll equate this to like Bell Vernon with Soto, and like they just we don't get to see them a whole lot, right? And a lot of these guys, they go out to the Ohio tournament and they wrestle like 13 matches out there. So for him to come out and major Jackson Hoy, that definitely caught me off guard, and I was very impressed with that because Jackson Hoy's a very solid freshman.
Yeah, and Caleb Delaney as well for Jefferson Morgan. He's been
Yep.
solid all year. He finished in third place. So Serco winning the way he did was definitely impressive. And Ringgold as a whole finished in fourth place. That kind of rounded out your top five: McGuffey, Trinity, Peters, Ringgold, Cannon, Mack. As far as 114 goes, Nick McGarity of Peters Township, he was dominant. He wins by fall to win the title.
Yeah, Nick McGarity, returning state medalist. We know how good he is as a sophomore this year. This weekend, he's going to be at Midwinter Mayhem, and 114 is stacked between Double A and Triple A. We're going to talk about some of those weights. It is impressive the lineup here this weekend at Midwinter Mayhem, which you also can watch live on PA Power Wrestling. So, but Nick McGarity, yeah, he just took care of business.
Yeah, and you know what? Just kind of looking through all the results too of the finals, Jeff. A lot of them were lopsided. I think you have those
Yeah,
one or two really dominant guys that make it to the final. You look at McGarity, who pinned Darius Simmons. Evan Tolliver of Ringgold pins Brock Dennison of South Fayette in the final. Dom Canale pinned Danny Smith at 127. So you had a lot of those lopsided wins in the final, but the one that was close was 133 and probably the best finals match. Collier Hartman and Cannon McMillan beating Drake McClure of Bentworth 6-5.
yeah, and I would argue that 152 was a really good match too. 133 was certainly a very good one with Collier Hartman beating Drake McClure by a point. Both these guys, we've seen them have similar trajectories this year. They've both been very close, but they haven't had that marquee win yet. Collier Hartman, I got to see him at the King of the Mountain tournament, and I kind of wanted to see him against Luke Willishell, and it didn't happen. But I think for him and Drake McClure, like this is all battle tested for them. Cannon Mack's going to go down to the Virginia duels this weekend, so they're going to get a lot of good matches there. And you're right, when you look at the finals here, there was only I think 3 matches that were just by decision only. 33 was one of them. 52 with Darius McMillan beating Jonah Erdley 5-4. That was another one. And then
I think that's it.
Yeah, maybe there's only 2. Yeah, I thought heavyweight was. Okay. Yeah, so there's only 2. I mean, I think it just shows your top tier talent, and you have some of the better guys that are just really, really good. And these other guys that are kind of in that other tier. And also you look at the scoring. I always say this with the 3-point scoring and with the 3-point takedown and the new back point rule, you can get matches that are just busted wide open, right? Owen Ifchik over Brock Evans, 13-4. Like it probably was closer than 13-4 than what's on the scoreboard.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's say Brock Evans hits a headlock at the end of that, and I don't know if I didn't look at the actual match score, but like let's say Evans or they were on their feet, he hits it at the end, and that's 13-11. 4-3,
Yeah.
so it's or 3-4. So and that makes it much closer. But you're right. I mean, you can make up those points in a hurry, but yeah, if you get hit in a big move, it looks a lot worse than it does, so to speak. But you look at some of the champs as well, Jeff, and these are all guys that are going to be making noise in the postseason. Lucas Barr, TJ Allison, Darius McMillan, Owen Ivsick, Jackson Angelo, Braden Welsh, Jay Conroy, and Alex Rosilko too for Bentworth. All guys that are going to make some noise come postseason time.
It's interesting because at heavyweight, Colin White ends up losing in the first round. I believe it
Yeah,
was
he
the
got
first,
stuck.
and comes all the way back for third. He was the top seed at 285. He was up 6-2, and then Edric Williams from Trinity pins him. Edric Williams then loses his next two bouts, and Colin White ends up winning. How many did it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches in the backside to take third. So, I mean, again, learning moments, right? Colin White had just wrestled at Powerade, and you get pinned in the first round at Tricata.
Yeah, and it's something that everybody's probably shocked about, right? But you know what? In addition to those 7 wins, Jeff, he won all 7 of those by fall as
You're
well.
right,
So not
right,
only making he made a statement by saying, "Hey, you know what? I got stuck. I'm gonna come out here and show everybody that I was the best wrestler in this weight class."
for sure.
But yeah, outside of that, obviously a very solid tournament all around. A couple of deeper weights than others, but so far, as far as the Tri County goes, the cream of the crop really rose here at West Green. The MAC tournament also from this past weekend, essentially the Beaver County tournament, is how you look at that.
Essentially,
Uh,
the Beaver County tournament.
but you look at the finals, Jeff, and it's really the same thing as far as a number of falls that take place, and major decision wins, and only a handful of actual decision bouts.
The Beaver County tournament plus West Allegheny, right? And West Allegheny
In Quaker Valley.
and well, in Quaker Valley, yeah, right. West Allegheny wins the title 196.5 to 192 points. So that was another close one. And you had a couple of those go head to head. You are absolutely right. When you look at the finals, not a whole lot of decisions here. A lot of these were falls. You had two again, two decisions. Yeah, two decisions. So it's just it's the way it is, right? But there were some really deep brackets here. I was surprised at how deep some of these brackets were. And you also have to caution it, like Gabe Lilly from Elwood City pins Rook Smith at 160. You could wrestle that 10 more times, and it's a decision 9 out of those times, right? So it is kind of deceiving a little bit, but there weren't a lot of brackets where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is super lopsided. There were some, like Bruce Anderchak kind of rolled through at 114. Thomas Banco from West Allegheny, he's a guy who was on our top incoming freshman. I had heard a lot about him coming up through the youth ranks. He wrestled at basically every tournament there was, and he's just now starting to get into the groove, and he got the championship done there. So I'm excited to see him at the Midwinter Mayhem because West Allegheny will be there. Peters Township, as I mentioned. West Allegheny is going to have a couple hammers like Michael Johnson looking to make some noise there.
Yeah, you mentioned Gabe Lilly, and he battled back in that third period and ended up beating Rook Smith, but he was down. Gave up the escape in the second, a takedown, but then got a reversal, gave up a reversal, but escape and takedown right towards the end and got it right to a fall to win the match. So, we've talked about Gabe Lilly. It feels like he's been in high school now for 7 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Just when he started out, what was he, Beaver Falls, I believe, or something like
Beaver,
that?
yeah, and then he had that big win at the WPIAL section tournament.
Yeah, and was it the WPIAL tournament though?
Maybe it was the WPIAL. That was when sections were gone. They were gone, and you were so happy because you hated double A sections, which you're a double A guy. You wrestled in double A sections. Why would you not?
Whenever they were actually good, yeah. But it was against Nico Farah, against Burl. I remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Shout out Nico Farah.
Of day one, and because Farah obviously was, I believe, he was a returning WPIAL champ at that time. But yeah, he's continuing to make some noise. Rook Smith is somebody we've talked about as someone that doesn't get a lot of credit, and came a state qualifier last year, and
and now in AAA. So like that for me is you look at this Bell Vernon and Montour. Now that they're in AAA, the West region, I mean, my gosh, you can't have a bad match there because you're going to have a lot of state qualifiers or regional place winners from last year that are not even coming close to making it to the state tournament. So, going back to the MAC, I thought 133 was a good match. Kale Yannick from Moon, he was out for at least a couple weeks. I know because I dropped him to injured in our rankings, but he comes back and he decisions AJ Snatchko from West Allegheny 10-7. I thought that was a good win for him. You never really know when these guys are missing time, how they're going to be when they come back, but he had a really good win over Snatchko.
Yeah, another one too, Jeff. I know we even talked about Matt Dana, Quaker Valley, and how he's continuing to ascend. But to get the tech fall over Liam Hine of Mars as well, impressive win for Matt Dana.
Yeah, and from the looks of his weigh-ins, he's going down to 139. In fact, I may have had him down at 139 prematurely, thinking he was going to be down there already, but I think he's definitely going down. Jack Dimer, did he already go down? Yeah, he's already down at 52. He took third. But yeah, you're right. I thought that was a very impressive win for him. Gavin McRae, he's down to 152. I think he's going to have a good year at that weight. So, and Antonio Bane too. I mean, the Central Valley guys, we just don't, we don't see them enough. At least we don't talk about them enough. And Bane is a guy who, was a state medalist and clearly has had a good career, but it's like we just don't really talk about them as much.
Yeah, absolutely. The other big tournament, the Bo Wood tournament from this past weekend. And again, same kind of thing in the finals as far as a lot of lopsided victories. But the one that stuck out to me most was 139, Carter Putt of Indiana beating Owen Campbell of Plum 4-2.
Yeah, so he and Nico Finella both went up a weight, so they are both down at 27-33 for the Powerade tournament, which I'm not surprised to see them both go up because I think, one, it's probably for Nico for sure, he looked huge at 27. Like if you watched, and maybe you and I everything runs together. I don't know if you and I were talking about this on our last show, but him and Dom Deputy, like, beside each other, Nico looked huge compared to Dom. So I wasn't surprised to see him go up there. But Nico pins Anthony Barra from Bloomsburg, who's not bad at all. Carter Putt beats a very good Owen Campbell 4-2. I mean, these guys, we talked about the 1-2 punch for a while now. I think these guys are going to have good postseasons, and especially Nico, I think he's going to have a really good year.
Yeah, despite being up in AAA, they're going to continue to hold their own and do pretty well. And even Ramil Islamov of Baldwin getting a tech fall. Dustin Kerr of Hampton, a solid wrestler.
Yeah.
But to do it in the first period, only a minute and 29 seconds is all
I
it
know.
took for Islamov. That's impressive, and it's showing he's continuing his upward trend from last season where he just blossomed in the postseason.
I mean, he not only did he blossom in the he blossomed in Hershey. I mean, he really turned it on at the right time. I mean, you picked the right time to come out on a tear because you come back all the way back to take fourth in the state. He's got nothing to lose here. I mean, he's already committed to college. He's going to WVU. I just think he's a guy who really has nothing to lose and everything to gain. So for him to beat Dustin Kerr, a regional medalist, that way, that was very impressive. I will say the match that probably surprised me the most because Michael Lawrence from Chartiers Valley had a couple really good wins earlier this year. He beat Gabe Johnson from Northern York, and he lost 14-6 to Julian Sepelak from Plum. That to me was a very noticeable result, and it certainly shot Julian up the rankings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It was a big win and obviously helped with Plum getting the second overall placement in the Bowood tournament. Mifflinburg was the champ, but Plum was number 2 and Indiana was number 3. So those were really the 3 with the most WPIAL schools from around this past weekend. And again, not many notable dual matches. A lot of them happening here tonight, but not a lot to really report on as of this moment. I'm sure we'll get more into those, Jeff. But really, the most exciting thing coming up is this weekend. You got a lot of WPIAL teams wrestling This weekend, you have the Burgestown Invitational. You got the Midwinter Mayhem. We've also got the Westmoreland County tournament as well. And then you even mentioned with the Virginia Duels as well, where Kanamack and McGuffey will be. But just to kind of look at some of these, let's first start with that Midwinter Mayhem, Jeff, since we'll be covering it here on Rockfin. A lot of schools, you mentioned both AA and AAA. It's really probably one of the biggest second half of the season tournaments that you're going to see a lot of state guys wrestling each other.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Midwinter Mayhem. Obviously, I'm impartial, but it's a phenomenal tournament, and it just mixes so many good AA and AAA schools from across the state, right? You got a lot of teams from District 12, District 1, District 4, District 5, District 6. I mean, it's a phenomenal just crop, of teams that come in and just kind of all throw together. I mean, think about it. Santino Sloboda and Brock Rothermel. What other tournament are you going to see these two wrestle at? You're not going to see them wrestle in the state tournament. You're not going to see them wrestle in any other tournament, but you're going to wrestle at the Midwinter Mayhem. Colin Guy versus Melvin Miller. That's a potential matchup, 160 pounds. So when you have Bishop McCourt there, clearly that adds another layer to that. But then you add in Northern Lebanon, you add in Quakertown, right? So we're going to have, I mean, fingers crossed, unless Meteor hits the Kavolkacek Center, we're going to have an Aaron Seidel versus Jax Forrest match, which is basically one of the best matches to happen in the year, right? Sam Herring, Brant Hare, Dalton Perry versus Bo Bassett, right? Just a ton of high-end talent. But for the WPIAL, I mean, you got TJ there, which without Maddox Shaw. So Maddox Shaw is still on the shelf, recovering from that injury. I don't have any further updates on when he's coming back. I don't think it's going to keep him out for the rest of the year, but I think they're just being cautious with him coming back. But you still have Bodie Marlowe, you have Shep Turk, Zach Rehack as well. So yeah, the Midwinter Mayhem is just a really good tournament. You got Highlands there too, so you got Javion Chambers at 107, Aiden Burford as well. West Allegheny, Michael Johnson at 107 is an additional to that. North Allegheny is also there. Kellen Buggy's back for them, so I'm happy to see him back. It's just going to be a really good tournament, and it's going to be a lot of you're going to see so many state place winners not place at the Midwinter Mayhem.
Yeah, because of the combination, right, of AA and AAA.
Correct.
We've talked a lot about, obviously Butler, Trinity being there as well, McGuffey, not there. I think they were still there in the past, but not this year. Virginia Gold, but Trinity being there. So be interesting to see how some of those Trinity guys. I'm sure your dad's excited for that.
No, that's
Jeff.
Trinity, and that's the wrong Trinity. That's the fake Trinity, as my dad calls them. That's Trinity in District 3. That's my dad calls it, the fake Trinity. Yeah, he doesn't like it. Yeah, that's Camp Hill Trinity, Mechanicsburg Trinity. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So, but outside of that, and just a number of high-end schools that are going to be there. When you look at the Westmoreland County tournament, that's just a solid tournament every single year. When you look at the talent that comes out from that area out east, should be a lot of great matchups and a lot of weight classes where they're 3, 4, 5 deep with solid guys.
I mean, there's a ton of weights like that. You kind of look at the upper weights, to be honest with you. 172, 189 are really good weights there for the Westmoreland County tournament. And again, a nice mix of, AA and AAA. The Westmoreland County tournament is always like a precursor for some sectionals and sometimes the WPIAL, right? How many times did Luke Pletcher and Mickey Philippi wrestle at the county tournament? So yeah, I mean, it's a really, you can't beat the Westmoreland County tournament and how good it is. The depth there, even though you have some teams that maybe are down a little bit, like Hempfield is down. They were just recently shut out by Burrell. So Hempfield just, they're just not the Hempfields that we remember, right? With a ton of different state ranked guys. So and it doesn't help that Nico Capusa's out with an injury. So yeah, the Westmoreland County tournament is going to be really good. I'm very curious to see Mario Hutcherson. I'm really want to see him come out. I wanted to see him at Powerade, but obviously an illness kept him from wrestling there. So this is going to be another good step in the right direction for him to kind of see where he's at. We got to see him at Fargo. It looked really good there. Beat Blake Hostetter a couple times, who's highly ranked in the state right now. Has a win over Gavin Cole from Council Rock South. So, Mario, he's just not saying he's not going to get a ton of good matches there, but I think he should win the title.
Yeah. Then you have the Burgestown Invitational, which has a lot of WPIAL schools you may not get to see much of in the team portion of it, but these schools have a lot of solid individuals. And then you usually pull a few schools as well, not in the WPIAL as well. Sharpsville, Meadville, Cochranton are a few schools that just stick out as far as not in the WPIAL, but going to wrestle in this tournament as well. Grove City, Chase Karrenbauer. So you're going to have some really good guys that are coming in here, as well as having some solid wrestlers from sprinkled in throughout the WPIAL.
Yeah, I mean the Burgestown tournament has been growing every year, and of course you have a lot of those AA schools there, but it's going to be a good tournament. You have a lot of those Mount Lebanon teams type teams that are just, you have some solid wrestlers all throughout. You got Cole Gibbons, you got Sala, you got some guys that are really gonna kind of, I think they have a chance to shine at these tournaments where you may get lost in the mix at Powerade, right? A lot of these schools, you may not have a guy that's going to place at Powerade, but at the Burgestown tournament, you're going to have some of these guys that are going to kind of break out a little bit. Pine Richland, I'm very curious to see what Pine Richland does, see how some of their guys perform, because they're another team that we don't necessarily see a whole lot of. North Hills, the same thing. I like to see them in this type of tournament. When you have the Powerade that is now just such a national tournament, right, with all these high-end individuals and teams, it's nice to see a tournament like the Burgestown tournament or Midwinter Mayhem where you have a chance for them to kind of prove themselves and shine a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that's probably a challenge for a lot of coaches when you have a top tier talent or a few studs, right, on your team. But you want to make sure you get some good matches for your mid-range guys, or even some of your 0 to 3 year type guys. And so the tournament like Burgestown Invitational, let's just use Grove City as an example, right? May not be the tournament for a Chase Karrenbauer, but it's going to be good for the rest of their team. Powerade's good for Chase Karrenbauer, right? So it's like you got to have that mix, so that way then you can get some of your guys some mat time and some good wins to get their confidence and get their experience up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a tough balance between keeping your elite guys hungry and chasing the next best thing. I think of like Landon Sidden from Norwin. He ran the circuit, right? He won a Beast title. He won a Powerade title. Then he went out to California and won a Doc B title, right? Which is fantastic for Landon Sidden. And it's good for those other mid-tier, mid-range guys to get some of those, to get that experience, right? But at the same time, it's nice to have a Burgestown Invitational or even the county tournament or, a Midwinter Mayhem where you're going to get some of those mid to lower range guys. You're going to get them more than two matches potentially, and maybe boost their confidence a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it all comes out in the wash, and it's the wrestling for a long time it's an individual sport, and the team is kind of, yeah, it's nice, right? We like the dual team championships, although we don't like them enough to have them in Hershey. We're going to have them at Altoona. Sorry, that wasn't a slight on anybody or any
no, not
body.
at all.
It's just a generality, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to balance that between keeping that team, just it's miserable if you have a group of guys that go 0-2 every week in a row, right? I mean, every tournament you go to. I appreciate the fact that when I was at Central Dolphin, we wrestled at like the top hat, and we were actually wrestled at the Buckskin Classic. We did wrestle in the Powerade tournament, but that was for sure our toughest tournament. But it wasn't like you got your head pounded in every single weekend. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm excited for this weekend though. This is a really good weekend for the individual rankings for me, because you get to see that mix of guys that are not necessarily going to see each other a whole lot, and it helps with that, pecking order for the state rankings, because a lot of times you have the clumping of regional and district wrestlers because they've wrestled each other so many times, and you have that common factor. This is nice to have Burgettstown and Midwinter Mayhem, and even the Westmoreland County tournament, because you can kind of spread them out a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. And then after that point, I mean, you have the Allegheny County tournament still to come. You have a few others sprinkled in, but now you're going to start really focusing more on the team aspect, I think, after this weekend.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is getting those guys healthy. I'm gonna go on a limb and say, Connellsville, it's if they can get their guys back, and have Tyler Gallus come back and get some guys at the right weights, I think they're gonna obviously be the team to beat. But I really want to see Franklin Regional at full strength. I really want to see Bethel Park at full strength. I really want to see Thomas Jefferson wrestling in a dual meet against a team that is solid from top to bottom, because their hammers are going to take them far. But what about the other guys, right? It's nice that you place top 10 in all these big tournaments, but when it comes to dual meets, it's a different game, right? So, yeah, it's going to be, I'm really very curious to see how it all pans out, because and I'll say for the statewide too, AAA is more exciting than AA. In I guess it depends on what your definition of exciting is. There's a lot of more uncertainty in AAA. In AA, the top three teams in AA, Faith Christian, Bishop McCourt, and Bishop McDevitt, I would venture to guess all three of those teams, the top three teams in definitely the top two, but potentially even Bishop McDevitt, could all win a dual tournament or a dual state championship in both AA and AAA. I don't think Bishop McDevitt is going to be able to knock off Bishop McCourt or Faith Christian, but I would favor them against a Bethlehem Catholic potentially. It's just a very different. It's a weird world we're living in. Shout out to you, Greg, and AA. I mean, it's a weird world.
Yeah, you have some premier talent in AA, that's for sure. And you could even look at it too. I mean, a lot of people say, "Hey, wrestle the state champs from AA and AAA every year." And most years, right, you would say AAA would win, but this year would be one of those years where AA could, be the winners as far as if that was a team matchup.
Oh, for sure. I mean, 1,000%. I mean, just based off of Faith Christian and Bishop McCourt alone, I mean, I would say they are favored. I don't think it's a close match. I think they are favored in that head-to-head. Luckily Landon Sidden had that head-to-head win over Joey Bachman to help one for the good guys. But my gosh, you're right. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, and how a couple programs with just such solid talent. I mean, we're living in a time where you have Faith Christian and Bishop McCourt. We've never had this before in AA. Not to this level of national level talent in AA. You'd always have a couple, right? You'd always have a handful, but never like this.
Well, you can even think back to like the Reynolds teams, for instance, right? That won the state titles and were very dominant in their own right. Had a couple of national ranked guys, but never to the point where Bishop McCourt and Faith Christian are.
No, I mean, in AAA, you had the Eastons, Northamptons, North Alleghenies of the world. I mean, even to a lesser extent, Central Dolphins, where you had 3, 4, 5 guys all nationally ranked. You think back to the 90s with North Allegheny. I mean, these were teams that were number 1, number 2 in the nation, right? We haven't had that before, where, even Bethlehem Catholic during their tear of 9, state championship titles, I don't think they were ever top 3 in the nation, especially with Blair always holding that line there. So again, like I don't think people understand where we're at right now in Pennsylvania wrestling to have Bishop McCourt and Faith Christian be as good as they are, which we just saw tonight. Bishop McCourt just put a beat down on Wyman Seminary, right? Um, it's crazy, right? I know this is a WPIAL focused show, but I mean, geez, that was an impressive performance by them, and yeah, so just interesting times. Some would say not good. So some would argue, I know a lot of specifically some folks down in Burgettstown would say it's not a great time to be wrestling and living, but as a fan and as somebody who loves the sport, not without a dog in the fight, not having a team, I really appreciate it. But there's some folks that aren't necessarily on that same page.
Well, the good thing for Burgettstown is they had their quality years before Bishop McCourt and Faith Christian built these powerhouses. They're in a down year, so to speak, as considering their last 4 or 5 year run that they've had. But yeah, I mean, we could spend a whole another half hour going down this can of worms and opening up this can of worms, right, and talking about the schools that Faith Christian and Bishop McCourt are, and even Bishop McDevitt too, right?
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, we could spend an hour on this, but we're not gonna do that to you because this is a WPIAL focus show, and we're gonna focus on the WPIAL. I again looking forward to seeing a couple. I mean, McGuffey going down to the Virginia duels is interesting to me. I think that's a really good tournament for them to be in. Jared Roberts is somebody who I think is going to get that team ready to go. Wanted to see Derry versus Bethel Park on Monday, but snow kept us from seeing that, so that sucked. But yeah, it's we're getting into that dual season where who's going to win? Is it going to be Burrell? Is it going to be Collinsville? Because that's the safe bet, right? Burrell and Collinsville. It's not going to be easy, right? Both those teams are going to be challenged a lot by some of those other teams, and it's a weird year for the state dual tournament because it's just at a different location. It's the format's a little different. I mean, the state brackets are completely a mess, but you have teams that are going to be wrestling each other very early on, and it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of it's gonna be interesting to see. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, and you're not taking all 16 as well, right? You're only taking the top 8.
Right.
Yeah, so that plays a factor as well as far as the outlook, right? As far as the team portion. So, but all things to look forward to here in a few weeks. But first, we got to get to that team portion, and no better way than having a solid WPIAL tournament. And I'm sure the committee is ready for these matches to start happening to figure out who will get the top 8 seeds.
You're right. They got the work cut out for them because unless some of these guys teams hit head to head from here until the end of January, it's basically a crapshoot. There's not a lot of comparables. Yeah, you had the Trinity duels, you had the Hampton Dog duels, but outside of that, you don't have a ton of comparables with some of these schools.
Right, and they're so spread out too at some of these sections that even trying to look at some of the individual results might be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see. But all things to look forward to here over the next couple of weeks. But got an exciting weekend of wrestling. Make sure you check out the Midwinter Mayhem this weekend here on Rockfin, and we'll be back next week to break it all down and look forward to hopefully breaking down some dual matches as well.
We can only hope so because we're gonna see how McGuffey does down at Virginia. We're gonna see where's Connellsville at this weekend. I forgot where we said they were at. They were at a dual tournament. I thought they were. Trying to pull up Connellsville their schedule, but I mean I think they're the team that I kind of really want to see if they can get to full strength, right, from a dual perspective. Yeah, they're going to be ones, and I think Trinity is also getting healthy at the right time. They're getting some guys back into the lineup, which I think is going to help. But yeah, I'm still trying to pull up Connellsville, their schedule here, to see where they're at. I thought they were have Hempfield. They're going out to Escape the Rock. That's right. They're going out to Escape the Rock in 2 weeks. So that's another huge tournament. Probably the second best tournament in Pennsylvania behind Powerade, with Midwinter Mayhem chomping at the trying to catch up a little bit. But yeah, so they're there, and then that's right. They go to Parkersburg Quad. That's in West Virginia. I knew they had one kind of weird one where they went out of state.
And some good Parkersburg, always a tough opponent, so should be fun to see how Connellsville does there. But be a lot of good wrestling action still to come. We still got some solid tournaments and as well as the duels and getting right into the postseason. So for Jeff Upson, I'm Greg Warnock. We appreciate you listening in and watching in to War Up.